Hi, this is Dan from DIY Domination. Have you ever wanted to learn how to start your own worm bin for vermicomposting? Vermicomposting is an eco-friendly way to reduce kitchen waste and produce nutrient-rich compost for your plants. It's a simple process that involves using worms, specifically red wigglers, to break down organic matter into a rich, fertile compost. In this video, we'll guide you through the steps of setting up your very own worm bin. We'll cover everything from choosing the right bin, preparing the bedding, adding the worms, providing food, and maintaining the right moisture levels, to harvesting your compost. You'll need a few materials to get started: a plastic or wooden bin with a lid, a drill for ventilation holes, shredded newspaper or cardboard, moisture-retaining bedding material like coconut coir or peat moss, red wiggler worms, and of course kitchen scraps. You'll find that starting a worm bin is quite simple and incredibly rewarding. So let's dive into the wonderful world of vermicomposting. By the way, if you like this video and want to see more videos with advice on sustainable farming practices, make sure to click the subscribe button and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we'll do our best to reply to your comment. First things first, you need to select a suitable container for your worm bin. The choice of bin is crucial and can significantly influence the success of your vermicomposting venture. So, what makes a good worm bin? Well, size matters. For beginners, an 18-gallon bin serves just fine. This could be a plastic or wooden bin, both have their merits. Plastic bins are affordable and easily available, while wooden ones are more breathable and sustainable. What's non-negotiable, however, is a good lid. It keeps the moisture in and unwanted pests out. Now let's talk about the breath of life, or rather the breath of your worm bin. Aeration. Drill holes in the bottom and sides of your bin. This ensures good air circulation, which is vital for the worms and the composting process. Remember, it's all about creating a comfortable home for your worms. A well-ventilated bin is the first step towards a successful vermicomposting setup. Now that you've got your bin, it's time to prepare the bedding. The bedding serves as both a home and a food source for our red wriggler friends. To start, we'll need to shred some newspaper or cardboard. Remember, the smaller the pieces, the easier it is for the worms to break down. Once shredded, it's time to add some moisture. Soak the shredded material in water until it's thoroughly wet, then wring out any excess water. The goal is to achieve a consistency like a wrung-out sponge. Moist, but not dripping. Now, fill your bin with the dampened bedding until it's about half full. This will give the worms plenty of space to move around and to start composting. Remember, creating a comfortable environment for the worms is crucial. Your worms will thank you by turning your kitchen waste into nutrient-rich compost. With the bedding in place, it's time to introduce the stars of the show, the red wiggler worms. These wriggly wonders can be sourced from any reputable worm supplier, or you might even find a friend or neighbor who's already into vermicomposting and can spare a few. When you've got your worms, gently spread them out on top of the bedding in your bin. They'll quickly burrow down to escape the light, getting to work on turning your kitchen scraps into nutrient-rich compost. The right amount of worms to start with can vary, but as a general rule of thumb, about 1 pound of worms for an 18-gallon bin is a good starting point. Remember, these worms reproduce quickly under the right conditions, so your worm population will grow to fit the size of their home and the amount of food available. These little creatures are the workhorses of your worm bin. Worms need to eat too. Let's talk about what and how to feed them. Your kitchen scraps are a veritable feast for your red wiggler worms. They love fruit and vegetable peels, coffee grounds, tea bags, and even crushed eggshells. However, there are some foods that worms find less appetizing and can even be harmful to them. It's best to avoid adding citrus, onions, or garlic to your worm bin. Meat and dairy products should also be left out, as they can attract unwanted pests and produce unpleasant odors. When feeding your worms, start with small amounts of kitchen scraps. As the worms adjust to their new environment, you can gradually increase the food supply. Remember, overfeeding can lead to problems like bad odors and pests. The key is to monitor your worm bin and adjust the feeding schedule as needed. Feeding your worms properly will keep them happy and productive. A crucial part of worm bin maintenance is ensuring the right moisture levels. You see, worms breathe through their skin. For this to happen, their environment needs to be damp but not too wet. Think of the consistency of a wrung-out sponge. That's the sweet spot. Now, how do you maintain these ideal moisture levels? Simple. Spray the bedding with water whenever it starts to dry out, but be careful not to overdo it. Soggy conditions can lead to unpleasant odors and other problems. On the flip side, if the bedding becomes too dry, your worms might struggle to breathe. Again, the solution is straightforward. Just add a little more water until you reach that wrung-out sponge consistency. And remember, always keep the lid on your bin. It helps retain moisture and keeps unwanted guests out. Remember, worms breathe through their skin, so a moist environment is essential. You've set up your worm bin, but your job isn't over yet. Now that your worm bin is ready, it's time to cover and monitor. Let's start with covering. The lid of your bin is invaluable. It keeps the moisture in, creating a damp environment that the worms need to breathe. It also deters pests and helps to maintain a dark environment that worms love. So make sure you securely place the lid on your bin, but remember not to seal it completely. The worms need air. Remember those ventilation holes we drilled? Now let's talk about where to place your bin. Worms prefer cool, dark places, so find a spot that's shaded and doesn't experience extreme temperature fluctuations. An ideal location could be a garage, basement, or a shaded corner in your backyard. Avoid places that receive direct sunlight or where the bin could overheat. Monitoring is the next vital step. You'll want to regularly check on the moisture levels in your bin. The bedding should feel like a wrung-out sponge. If it's too dry, give it a spritz with some water. If it's too wet, you can add some dry bedding to balance it out. Keep an eye out for any unpleasant odors. A healthy bin should smell earthy, not foul. If you detect an off smell, it might be a sign that you're overfeeding your worms or that there's not enough air circulation. In such cases, cut back on the food and stir the bedding to introduce more air. Don't forget to look for pests, too. Small amounts of fruit flies or mites can be normal, but if you notice an infestation, it could be a sign that the bin is too moist or the food is exposed. To handle this, bury the food scraps deeper and adjust the moisture level. Finally, observe your worms. Are they active? Do they look healthy? If you see them trying to escape, it might mean the conditions in the bin are not right. Check the moisture, temperature, and food supply. Regular monitoring will ensure that your worm bin stays healthy and productive. With a little attention and care, you'll have a thriving worm bin that's turning kitchen scraps into nutrient-rich compost in no time. The fruits of your labor are ready. It's time to harvest your compost. After a few months of diligent care, your worm bin has transformed kitchen scraps into nutrient-rich compost. Here's how to harvest it. Start by gently pushing the compost to one side of the bin. You'll notice that it's dark and crumbly, with a pleasant earthy aroma. On the empty side, add fresh bedding and food, just as you did when you started your bin. Over the next few days, the worms will migrate towards the fresh food and bedding. Once they've vacated the compost, you can harvest it. Collect the compost and use it to enrich your garden soil. It's perfect for potted plants, vegetable gardens, and flower beds. Just mix it into the top layer of soil and let the magic happen. With this nutrient-rich compost, your plants will thrive like never before. You're now equipped with all the knowledge needed to start your own worm bin. From selecting the right bin to preparing the bedding, adding the worms, providing food, maintaining moisture, to finally harvesting nutrient-rich compost, you're all set to embark on this exciting journey. Remember, it's essential to keep a close eye on the bin, noting any signs of trouble like unpleasant odors, excessive moisture, or unwelcome pests. Avoid overfeeding your worms. Start with small amounts and gradually increase as they acclimate to their new home. And don't forget, your bin prefers the shade, so find a spot that keeps it out of direct sunlight to prevent overheating. This vermicomposting venture is not only an effective way to recycle kitchen waste, but it also provides you with a constant supply of nourishing compost for your plants. So, what are you waiting for? Get started on your vermicomposting journey today. If you liked this video, then make sure to also watch these videos for more DIY sustainable farming tips.